At the time of his murder, Tony Carter was 4'5", 9 years old, and lived with his mother, Vera, at 896 West End Avenue. He attended E.R. Carter Elementary and ominously took odd jobs around the West End Mall, exposing him to strangers almost every day. Less than 10 minutes away on the same road was Stuart Lakewood Mall, a regular haunt of Charles Theodore Sanders, whose family comes up in this case very often due to his involvement with the Ku Klux Klan. He was a recruiter in the Atlanta area. More on him in a moment. This is just a brief overview. Tony's cousin was the last person to see him alive, playing hide-and-seek at 979 Cunningham Place. At 0100 on July 6, 1980, Tony's body was found in a dumpster by workers at a local warehouse near 657 Wells Street Southwest. Oddly, police said he was most likely stabbed to death. His body moved long after his passing. He is considered the 11th canonical victim of the child murderer. The murders before him had unusual patterns. Aaron Weish was strangled, but LaTanya Wilson and Chris Richardson were too badly decomposed to list a cause. Eric Middlebrooks was beaten and stabbed. Jeffrey Matthias was also too badly decomposed to tell. Angel Lanier, the first female victim, was strangled. Yusuf Bell was beaten and stabbed, but no cause of death could be found, and the first three victims, Edward Smith, Alfred Evans, and Milton Harvey, likewise couldn't have a cause of death listed. If these kills were committed by the same person, they were taking a long time to determine which method of murder they preferred, a common practice for serial killers, although generally they settle on an MO very quickly. Back to Charles Sanders. I do not want to totally discount his involvement in this murder, but I should bring him up because of his habit of hanging out at local shopping malls and statements he made to an undercover FBI informant. At that mall down the road, the Stuart Lakewood Center, he was in a car with his friend. A man he didn't know at the time was feeding info to the FBI because the feds were considering the Klan's involvement in the Atlanta child murderers. A boy named Luby Geter pushed a shopping cart into his vehicle, and Charles ranted and raved that he'd strangle Geter. Over the next few months, Geter and over a dozen children connected to him would somehow end up missing or dead. This began with his girlfriend Terry Pugh, who lived in the same apartment with Teddy Smith, murdered in 1979. Friends of these three people would become victims of the Atlanta child murderer going forward. It's important to point out that this incident with Geter happened months after the murder of Tony Carter, and as far as I can tell, the two children didn't know each other. It's also important to point out that after New Year's 1981, the murders featured more strangulation and older children, even a few adults. My personal theory is that the earlier murders were committed by smaller serial killers who were unconnected or were just the result of the sad violence of the early 1980s. The real Atkid murders began at the beginning of 1981 with Luby Geter, and certain parties felt they could use them to initiate a race war. The final few murders, mostly of adults involved in a robbery, could be a case of an organized crime ring gone bad, which I've detailed previously. Incompetent police work lumped them all together, and the FBI, realizing that implicating the Klan in anything could lead to a very real racial insurgency, blamed everything on Wayne Williams, who in my personal opinion was certainly involved in shady business and likely several murders. That way they could close the books and simply refuse to do their job, and there are likely several people who are still walking the streets guilty of killing these children. Tony Carter is buried up here at the entrance of the Westview Cemetery in Hogansville, about an hour and a half south of Atlanta. I said that he was probably not involved with Luby Geter or any other of the victims, and I should point out that another boy was killed at around the same time as he was, named Earl Terrell. Now, Earl Terrell lived with different members of his family at the time, so the family relations were likely strained, and he might not have known these people very well, but this makes me wonder if the Terrell family and the Carter family both grew up in the same area, which might indicate perhaps a local serial killer. I don't know. This is something we'll have to look more into.